And we have an interesting morning today. As Kalev mentioned, that it's a real event, which is kind of naughty, but we'll see how it goes. At first, I will talk about the identity and access management and what we have done there with this area. And afterwards, Ivan from Fortrock will talk about in more detail about the company we are partnering with. And one of the reasons I'm here today is that we have been active on identity and access management market for some years, and we're partnering with Fortrock, and this partnership has been successful so far. And later on, there will be interesting panel discussion with our guests, which will be interesting. And at first, I will talk about a bit more the company Icefire. And I have worked in Icefire more than 4 years. And Icefire is probably most known by the financial solutions. And often it is told that, oh, you're probably a coding house when we talk to people that are not so familiar with the company. How we see ourselves is that we are rather a digital transformation company, and we like to engage to the business processes of our customers to understand better their needs. And afterwards, we have got familiar with their processes. We suggest them how they can improve their business using the digital tools. Icefire itself has been on the market more than 18 years, and we have more than 100 people working in our company. And the main areas, as I told, is the financial solution development, and but this is not the only area we are active on, and we are providing also identity and access management solutions. One of our largest project is currently on an end phase, and it has turned to be out a success. And in addition to financial solutions and identity and access management solutions, we are dealing also with medical solutions, which is, considering the situation, not a surprise. And from technology-wise, we are dealing mainly with Java, and the backend technology is Java, and front-end is basically React.js. Also, what has changed during the last years is that as we have so far dealt with the on-premises solutions, the new direction is that more and more companies expect us to deliver the solution in cloud, or they expect us to deliver software as a service, as companies tend to not have anymore the IT departments on so large scale, and they expect that somebody else takes care of this area. And as I told, we are partnering in identity and access management area with Fortrock. And the question may arise now that what is identity and access management? And identity and access management, as the definition says, is a framework of rules and procedures to grant the right people the access to the right resources. And why this topic has become so important is that, as the seminar title says, that we are talking about identity and access management, in post-pandemic world, but as we know, currently it is still ongoing. And what has changed during the last 6 months is that the border between home and work has been blurring. And it means that previously you came to office, you more or less felt safe there, security-wise, that it's your secure area, and the company handled the secure area as well, that it has a secure perimeter. But now, when you're working from home every day, then you will need to access the resources at work the same way you did as you were in office. So what we will take care of is regarding the access to your work resources is that we need to provide some kind of identity governance solution. And it means that the employee onboarding and offboarding and all the process of giving your employees right accesses has to go very seamlessly and very easily to the human resource department as well as for security department. And this is one of the area we feel that we are good at. And together with ForgeRock, we are implementing identity governance solutions. And the second area, which will affect mostly the end customers, is the customer journey to your services and products. So what happened during the first month of the COVID pandemic was that a lot of companies' digital capability was overloaded, which meant that their systems didn't keep up. And we know from news that, for example, the sellers' orders amount rose 3 times, basically. And even the system was good at keeping up with the pace. They still had to rethink all their process. IAM is like a first gate to the services and products of the companies, which means that if this step is not performing, then customers probably will choose your competitor or some other service, which means that you will basically lose your customer base if this part of the information system is not performing. And so these are the 2 areas we are dealing with. One is the employees part, how to manage the employee accesses and the rights. And the second part is the end users, how the end users can access so seamlessly your services as possible. During this journey, we have met some challenges. And I have listed here some of these that we have to face usually when dealing with an IAM project. One of these challenges is how to offer people as comfortable login scenario as possible. And probably one of the simplest examples is that finding the balance between the seamlessness and security is for example, the passwords. Even we are not using the passwords in local market so much anymore because we have all the smart ID, ID card, and mobile ID, then still there are systems that require passwords. And we often know that when we have to change a password or set a password, that there is a requirement that your password has to be long enough. So we come up with some solutions and to meet the security requirements. But where it ends up usually is that I know at least one person at home who has a Word doc file which has listed all the secure passwords there. And when walking in office, then we see some post-it notes on screens which have these secure passwords written on them. So from one point, we have this security, but from other point, we are somewhat failing. But yeah, this is a question for us that whether we should give the end user the seamlessness in a way that the security departments feel secure as well, but at the same time, users don't come up with some alternative solutions. As I mentioned before, the issue that has come up during the last year is that we have to be able to provide a solution for all the scenarios, whether it be on-prem, whether it is the solutions are in cloud or software as a service. To go extreme, we had a customer that had all the infrastructure set up as a software as a service. And they asked us to put about 200 software as a service behind the IAM. And we are meeting these situations more and more, which means that IAM has to be able to integrate the solutions in on-prem, in cloud, in SaaS. So it's quite interesting landscape out there when you start dealing with the identity and access management world. Also, as the landscape is quite interesting, usually what we find in companies is that there are multiple applications around the company, and they all have their own identity, which means that the customer identity is stored in all of these applications, meaning that if you want to change, for example, the phone number in one applications, your expectation is that it automatically changes in another application as well. But it's usually not the case. And if you change some phone number in one system, then there will be a Jira ticket that will be sent to administrators that, okay, you have to change the phone number in this and this and this and that system as well. But we have a solution for that, which is able to synchronize the data between different applications. So you really get the feeling that you have single identity across all the applications in the enterprise. And if you start the IAM journey, then there is also a danger of over-engineering. So people start with a huge enthusiasm that we have a new project, we have to describe all the permissions and roles inside the company. But it ends usually there that there are huge Excels that are describing all the permissions that the person can have. And when we are introduced to the company, then we usually find a huge Excel that lists hundreds of permissions. But what we have seen is that it ends usually there that since the security department is not able to understand what is going on and the work needs to be done, then the users are given administrator rights to everything, meaning that they can do whatever they want. So there is some kind of collision there, and it requires often also a balance between the security and the work processes, and that needs to be in place. One of the topics that we can't ignore is the performance. and even Estonian market is quite small, there is still need for good performing system. As I mentioned before, that if your system is not performing well, people find another place which has a better logging system and move there. Regarding that, our partner ForgeRock has divided its performance scenarios into three different clusters, which means that they have tests for small cluster, medium cluster, and large cluster. And the small cluster has been quite enough for Estonian market because it contains 1 million users, and medium cluster is for 10 million, and large cluster is for 100 million. So we feel quite comfortable when implementing this solution in local companies. And the last challenge probably has been always that the local market feel or is comfortable with Smart ID and Mobile ID and ID card, but it's very Baltic state specific, and it doesn't come out of the box, and usually we need to add these components as custom solutions. And it has been quite easy so far, and we are able to meet the requirements of the companies regarding that. IAM itself, when I started with this journey, then usually what we see is a login page, and it often raises the question that how hard it can be to set up a login page. And but when we dig deeper into this area, then we see that behind this login page there are multiple components that need to be taken care of. And if I go one by one shortly, then we have the authentication, where we have to compare the customer credentials, what are in place. Then we have to decide what are the access roles and rules inside the company. This requires a lot of work. Then the session management, that when we move across different applications or move away from the page, the expectation is that the session stays in place. Then we have the auditing, identity repository, where the identities are, monitoring to get an understanding what's going on in the system, the single sign-on, integration with backend systems, the standards OAuth2, and also integration with legacy applications. So this is all that is usually behind the login page. So there is not just the username and password, but you can't get your expectations high that, okay, we need only login page. So to get the login page, you have to get and set up everything that's listed there. As I told, we have three scenarios usually that IAM needs to be integrated with the software as a service solutions. Then we have the on-prem solutions that need to be integrated with IAM. But the most common one is that we need to set up a hybrid solution for an enterprise that has been on the market for some time, as it has legacy. And we have a solution for all of these scenarios, as the platform that we are partnering with has come up with products for all of them. And here I would like to introduce our partner's representative, Ivan Dijkstra from ForgeRock, to talk about in more detail about the identity and access management platform. So Ivan, are you there?
Hey Martin, good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
It seems that there's a little delay between my sound and your sound, but I think that will be okay going forward for the presentation.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm not sure if you can, if you're able already to see the presentation, but I assume you can.
Yeah.
And as you can see my face, you see that I've put myself in Tallinn, where I actually wanted to be today. Unfortunately, the situation nowadays in the world doesn't really allow for it. I think everybody's very familiar with that. So I'll just pretend that I'm there. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to join this morning. Let's quickly start by saying, okay, who are ForTruck? As Martin already mentioned, we're a digital identity platform company, which means that we deliver technology to our customers that helps them solve their IAM challenges. Company was founded in 2010 in Oslo, but we've been headquartered in San Francisco since 2014. And as of today, we have over 600 employees and over 1,000 customers all across the globe. Now, the platform is really focusing on solving enterprise-wide use cases with a horizontal solution, meaning that there's a lot of capability in the platform. I think you will see that we can solve almost any use case with the exception of privileged access management. And we're a subscription company with cloud and on-prem options, just like Martin mentioned before. Okay, what is it that we do? We enable businesses to offer exceptional digital experiences and no compromise of security. Martin mentioned before, right? How do you balance security and user experience? Well, we believe that there doesn't have to be a trade-off between the two. You can have both at the same time. So to deliver on that promise, we've developed the identity platform, which is very comprehensive. And it offers choice, right? You can consume it as a service, as Martin mentioned, deployed on-prem, in a cloud, in any cloud, or a hybrid model. This should give businesses the flexibility to combine any of these options and scale up as the business requirements evolve over time. ForTruck has a culture of innovation. We've been always at the forefront when it comes to open standards. We've helped develop some of the open standards. And most recently, we've been launching products that have a lot of AI and ML capabilities in them. For example, in helping to address the associated risk with your access landscape across your entire company, and a way to maybe automate some of these processes. And in the very near future, we will also introduce more AI and ML capabilities to really help determine, if access attempts are fraudulent or if we can actually trust them. So why do companies do business with ForTruck? Because of the horizontal platform, they really use ForTruck to consolidate their IAM efforts. So basically simplify, unify, and standardize their IAM operations on. So that's who we are, what we do. I will dive a bit later into the how. Martin told a few things, but I'll touch on a few things. But first, I would like to maybe ask a question to the room, and I'm pretty sure that some people might have seen this picture or some variant of this. And I'm just curious, for how many people in the room is this close to the truth, or maybe too close to the truth at the moment? And I can see you guys. So if there are people that feel like that, raise your hand. Is this something that you feel that might be true for your company? There's a few. I don't see them much, but it definitely has had an impact, right, on companies, and we have seen a short-term effect. I think that one of the short-term effects we've seen is that the number of people that work remotely has increased dramatically during the COVID pandemic, and that potentially has a major impact on IT security. What we see especially is that companies have really focused and prioritized getting people productive, and now security kind of has to play catch up. Now, if we look at the consumer side of things, where ForTruck has recently done their own research, we have seen that there is a huge impact there as well. And how could that impact your business? One thing is clear to us, however: identity and access management has the potential to have a significant impact on how well your business can handle these changes. So let's have a look at some of the things that the identity and access management can help with. I looked into some research as well. It's been done a huge research in June, asking a lot of IT leaders about, okay, what has the impact of the pandemic been on your IAM strategy and in your IAM setup? And almost every business agrees that IAM is critical to securing the remote workforce. So 98% of the people that were surveyed depend on these solutions to keep their business secure in the work from anywhere era, right? The borders, as Martin mentioned, the borders between home and work are fading. And how do you do that? It has an impact. But there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Businesses build their IAM strategies based on organizational requirements and objectives. However, 96% of IT decision makers reveal that remote work has really impacted their IAM strategy. Now, whether they were prepared or not to accommodate secure remote work, or they needed to rethink how they centralized employee access and authentication, remote work has had a major impact on IAM and really kind of highlighting, emphasizing how critical it is to have a flexibility in that strategy so you can adapt quickly. And especially doing all of that work while your employees are still securely connected. Now, in terms of how businesses are securing their remote workforce, even 62% of the interviewed people believe that multi-factor authentication is the most effective way to do that. Now, as a lot of you people in the room might know, it's very common to use something you know, something you have, and something you are as those factors to determine whether or not you get access. And MFA really doubles the security of employee logins, helping your IT teams to ensure that all logins are legitimate. And I would say, an additional layer of security is more critical now than ever. IT teams might have less oversight into which employees are logging in to which resource from which device and which location. And that context matters. Another thing that came up, I was in Copenhagen a couple of weeks back, where we were talking to a lot of IT leaders, CIOs and CISOs, and they also said that there is the element of, teaching our employees, like making them understand why is it so important to maybe add a little bit of extra friction, or why is it so important to have these security protocols in place. There's a lot of work on the back of this that needs to be done from an organizational point of view as well. Technology is not the sole solution for that. So security awareness, right? So the highest priority of businesses implementing IAM strategies at the moment to secure their workforce is to really facilitate secure access, right? Over 60% of the respondents indicate that secure access is one of their top 2 priorities. So looking then at the next 12 months, 59% of these surveyed people strongly agree that increasing security for their workforce is through IAM is a critical priority. As we have now entered the work from anywhere era, organizations will need to consider what the long-term IAM strategy is, because remote work is staying, and it is the new normal. And as mentioned, the majority of respondents had to already adjust their IAM strategy to enable these employees to securely work from anywhere already. So over the next year, we expect a lot of businesses adapting, I would say adapting is maybe a better word than adopting, but adapting and optimizing their IAM strategies to accommodate their remote workforce. So to sum it up, with employees accessing business resource from anywhere, organizations will need to determine an IAM strategy that offers security from everywhere, for everywhere, while also remaining easy to use. So, how do you balance that security and usability? And as I said, there shouldn't be a trade-off. And it doesn't have to be a challenge with the right IAM strategy in place. So if you recognize yourself in these findings, I guess it's pretty safe to say that you're not the only one. A lot of companies are grappling with this. Now, what does the COVID situation and the pandemic situation mean on the consumer side of things? So as I mentioned, we've conducted a research, and I'm happy to share the research after in the follow-up to this meeting. I think the most important finding is that around the globe, nearly half of the consumers plan on using more online services after the pandemic. So this suggests that we will see a long-term shift in consumer behavior, and businesses and organizations must be prepared to meet that demand. There are still countless unknowns associated, right, with the pandemic. So, and also its continued impact on how consumers work, live, buy, play, learn online. And business and organizations that do not work to meet this shift in consumer behavior, I might be taking a risk, right? A risk of not meeting the consumer expectations, and employee expectations for that matter, but also therefore miss out on potential revenue opportunities or lose ground to competitors and new entrants. Like Martin said, right? And it says here on this page, a lot of people are actually, ready to use another solution if your solution is not seamless or frictionless. So it's very important to look at that as well. So taking these findings in consideration, how can IAM and identity, transform secure business over time? I think this is a slide that sums it up a little bit. So user data is gold, given it is quality data. And Martin, gave a good point, right? We still see a lot of silos, and it's paramount, I would say, to aggregate the data of your users across all of the channels and create what we would like to call a horizontal layer of identity. So have an engine that handles your user data and that has the capability to sync the data between all your critical applications and sources where you would need that. This allows your business to become more relevant in a personalized approach when you think about consumers, and generalized user experience. And that's important. Security is also linked to privacy, and when we talk about privacy and trust specifically, consumers, especially consumers, have concerns, particularly when we are talking about their data and the ability of businesses to not infringe on personal privacy. Trust is a key element to overall user experience, and businesses that cannot deliver a high level of trust cannot provide a high level of customer experience. And trust can be built, which is a great thing. And trust can be built when you are transparent about what data you have, what you'll use it for, and giving the users control over that data, to revoke or to grant access to it, or even to be completely removed from your system if that's what they want to do. And if laws and regulations allow it. I know there's situations where you as a company are not allowed to do it. A seamlessness and frictionless login experience, Martin touched upon that, for both workforce and consumers. They have similar wishes and demands. They know what good looks like. They expect that from you as a company, as an employer, but also from you as a business to the consumer. But how do we offer more convenience while we have to be more wary of threats and attacks and track more activity than close to before? For that reason, more and more businesses look to adopt a zero trust or a carta model. And that means that basically by default, they don't trust anyone, either from inside or outside the organization or the network. And they enhance security by continuously challenging the access rights of everyone. So context comes into play, and the context really helps to determine, well, is this trusted, yes or no? Can we allow this to happen, yes or no? So how does ForgeRock do it? And Martin, did a great job already at explaining some of these things. But if we look at the platform, and it's what I mentioned at the very start, I think businesses are using ForgeRock because of the comprehensive digital identity platform, where they can simplify their environment by consolidating to one solution that's leveraging open standards. By doing that, they can increase productivity, reduce costs, and improve the overall security, privacy, and compliance. And all of that contributes to results in competitive advantage and business growth. So if we look at it from a high level, looking at the components, access management is really the process that allows you to create unique login journeys for each of your users, depending on the context for all your different channels. So a mobile app would need a different experience than a web application. But most importantly, context is being used for this dynamic access decision making. So where are you coming from? What device are you on? What is your browser? Can we safely say that this is still the same user as the user that logged in? And the goal really is to make the journey as friction-free and at the same time as secure as possible. Now on the left-hand side, you see a lot of these context elements that we take into account. Now, ForgeRock doesn't live everything out of the box. I'll take, for example, identity proofing. We work with third-party providers. We integrate out of the box with third-party providers that do identity verification. Companies like Verif, that Teet is in a room, that have really built a product that is far beyond what we would be able to do. So we leverage that technology. We integrate it into the platform and in journeys, and really allow the platform to orchestrate an entire journey, including those steps that you might need from a third-party provider. And Martin mentioned, for example, integrating mobile ID in your ID card solutions is a good example of that. Identity management is the tool that really helps to manage the user lifecycle. So you joiner, move, or leave processes, and on the back end, it really helps you to aggregate that user data that's coming in. We use especially in the consumer world, we use a concept called progressive profiling, where you build and aggregate data over time when it makes sense. Then you can store that data and you really synchronize it in a bi-directional way with your other target systems, like HR and CRM systems, so that all of the data is always up to date in any place. Then having that data quality, you can then really leverage that data to improve and personalize the services that you deliver to either the user or the customer. It also offers tools like self-service, so think password resets, but also changing your details, social registration, and consent management. So essentially, the tool really gives company the ability to create a single view of the customer or the user. And in addition, for workforce, there are governance and administration capabilities to define roles, entitlements, and also to manage access request and review operations. So it's a very comprehensive tool. Finally, I think GDPR and data residency are becoming more and more relevant to a lot of businesses, if not already are like very relevant. So we have an identity store that runs in high availability and can store the data in the right places depending on where you need to store the user data if you're looking at an international environment, for example. So why do we do it? Breaking down the silos. Martin mentioned we have data sitting in a lot of different places, and that data should be synchronized, right? If you change your data at one place, it should also change in another place. Outdated security, username, password. I really firmly believe that we will go to a passwordless period. The password will stop being used. And that's a very static way of authentication, but also authorization and fraud detection. A lot of these solutions don't have the ability to take in context into the login journey, making them very static. Limited extensibility. Now, how do older solutions support the mobile applications or the API economy? A lot of solutions were not built for that. Scalability, Martin mentioned something about that before. A lot of older solutions were really built with the enterprise in mind, right? Hundreds of users, maybe a couple of thousands of users, but they're not built for scale, where you maybe on tax. In Norway, we work with the government. They have tax return day, and then we have millions of people logging in roughly at the same time, and it has never broken. So that kind of scale can be needed sometimes. Obviously, privacy and consent has really evolved. We have things like GDPR in Europe, but we have a lot of these kind of regulations popping up all over the globe. A lot of solutions don't really have the ability to deal with that, especially when you think about granular user managed privacy control. So really allowing the user to kind of, on a granular level, decide, okay, this is what I want to share, this is what I don't want to share. Inflexible solutions, we still see a lot of companies with homegrown solutions that have been built 10 years ago by one or two people, and some of them might be gone. People don't want to touch the solution anymore. They can't integrate with new cloud-based applications, for example, and it's a pain. So standardizing is something that we're looking at. And finally, rubber stamp compliance is really about those managers getting a list of people every year. It's like, okay, this is your pool of employees, this is the access they have. can you please review and say if they still need that access going forward. Now, a lot of managers look at it and be like, I don't understand half of it, but everything went fine this year, so I'll just approve it. It doesn't only pose a security risk, but it also could mean that you're paying too much for software license that you potentially might not even need. So those are things that we are really trying to address. Now, finally, so what are the business benefits? And I always talk about the three-legged stool to finish up. I think the three most important things that we can control are elevating the user experience, right? Really reducing friction from the experience while maintaining security. Using context to really personalize, to sum it up. The reducing cost, obviously, super important, right? Benefiting from a consolidated solution doesn't only mean that you have to buy less different pieces of software, but it also means that you can standardize or let's say train your staff on less software, making you more agile to work with these solutions. Obviously, having modern IAM techniques and automated processes will help you reduce the time of work you need to put in there as well. Improve security. Obviously, the security landscape is continuously changing, and you want to be able to counter that, right? To counter those threats. Now, working with a vendor like ForTrock, and there's other vendors out there in the market, obviously, who are continuously working to make sure that that our platform is able to handle those threats, saves you the effort of doing that. And I think the last driver and the benefit, obviously, is more a checkbox maybe for a lot of companies, but you need to comply with regulatory with regulations and laws. And we work continuously around the clock to make sure that we have a solution that really enables you to do that. And it just saves you a lot of time and work in the end of the day. And it takes away part of your liability as well. So I think that's the end of it. Went a minute over, sorry about that. I hope it was informative, so I want to thank you for listening. And if there are any questions in the room, please raise your hand and I'm happy to answer them.
So, if you have questions, Anna has a microphone here, and Ivan is ready to respond to your questions.
Either I don't hear anything or it's just very quiet.
It's Estonia. It's usually dark and quiet.
I guess there are no questions at this point.
It seems, Ivan, that there are no questions at that moment.
Okay. All right. Anyway, thanks.
Sorry.
Have a great day.
Ivan, very quick question still. Other than this presentation, can you somehow elaborate a little bit what have you done, reached on the client side in Baltics or like in Estonia specifically?
Martin, I guess you're maybe even more able to answer that question than I am, because you've been really knee-deep into the projects.
Yeah, we are finishing up a project in Estonia for a large financial institution, but since the companies would like to keep a secret what they are using for identity and access management solutions, then I can't mention the company's name. But yeah, we have implemented the end user customer journey, basically all the identity and access management for end users, the ID card, mobile ID, smart ID, and all the customer identity repository as well. And we are currently in discussion with two other companies regarding the implementation of the identity governance part, which means the employee onboarding and offboarding processes. And that's what we are currently doing. And the solutions themselves are deployed to cloud, and they are not on-premises solutions. And so far, since the software as a service is quite new, then we will be introducing this to clients as well.
I think one of the key elements, Martin, might be that looking at how you've integrated also with older, let's say legacy applications that still are sitting on-prem that can't be touched, which are typically very hard to integrate with. If you look at a lot of software as a service vendors that kind of offer a black box, I think that flexibility that you have leveraged from the ForgeRock platform, and the extensibility where you've been able to add not out-of-the-box features to be used as out-of-the-box features. I think that is something that for companies is something that they very much need sometimes. I think in these specific cases that has really made a difference.
Ivan, this is Tiit. I have a question about beyond identity. About a month ago, there was a newswire about this where Beyond Identity is joining ForgeRock's trust network of certified technology partners. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Tiit, I have to admit, I need to come back to that question for you, because the truth is we have quite a large base of technology partners. Meaning that I'm not fully aware of each and every one specific in terms of what we've agreed. So I will come back to you on a personal email on that one, what we've done with Beyond Trust. If that's okay.
So
if there are no other questions, then we will move on with the interesting part about the discussion. And I will introduce Tiit, who will introduce himself and panelists as well.
Yes, thank you. Please come on stage. So let's see, what about the 2 meters thingy here? So maybe it's just enough if we all talk to that direction, and then we should be okay. Yes, so let's start with introductions. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tiit. I'm VP of Engineering at Veriff. We are turning physical identity into an electronic one, or digital identity on transaction basis. So people, end users, going through our clients' flows can verify their identity, and then our clients get the webhook response back saying that this is it. This was the person, this is the extracted data, and that's the verdict about their identity. Company has been here for quite some time, actually. We celebrate soon our 5th anniversary, but we really got juices going when we raised the A round about 2 years ago, and that's where I joined the company as well. But over to you, Tonu.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Tonu Tammer. I'm currently director of CERT Estonia, so we're keeping an eye on our little corner of cyberspace, with the particular view on keeping an eye out for the things that should never happen. And in the previous position, almost 10 years, I worked in the Home Affairs, so the largest sort of keeper of both physical identities here and also responsible for the digital identities.
Hello, I'm Tanel Tammet, and I work mostly, I would say, as a professor at the Tallinn University of Technology, where I work with a wide spectrum of AI and data science things. And I also work part-time at Cybernetica, where I'm helping to build up competence for building cybersecurity systems.
Yeah, I'm Kalev. I'm a bit more than 20 years in the different identity management, but I started probably on a governmental side, on the physical identity and creation of documents there. And when I looked at those identity access management big tasks, then I thought about the things that we discussed with Alex like more than 20 years ago when they hired me with KIPS. What we had to achieve there, and I think that the list is still the same. I thought what has changed in the 20 years, then we have joined the EU, we have now, I think, more educated the end users to ask more stuff from us, and then we have compliance list, which is probably more than 10 times longer, but otherwise the actual thing that we need to achieve hasn't changed much.
All right. But let's get on with the panel. So a couple of rules, just to make it more interesting. I may ask provocative questions. Your job is to answer them. I might argue, that's okay, that's part of the show. I might not agree with myself half of the time, right? Okay. I might ask specific question for a person, or I might pose a question that is directed to everyone. So bear with me. When you have an answer, shoot. You also may ask questions from each other. I think that's why it becomes much more interesting and much more interactive. We also try to involve a little bit of audience in our panel discussion. All right? Ready?
Basically, you said that you are the king here, and we follow.
Yes, there you go. All right, but remote work was already mentioned, highlighted by Ivan quite a lot, and my own personal story with Veriff is that luckily we were kind of ready for remote work because we sort of built up the whole thing from ground up in the right way. So it wasn't really a problem. But I want to explore a little bit the other industries and specifically in context of identity and access management. So when COVID started, couple of industries really started to boom, right? Everyone needed to have an e-commerce platform, right? Everyone needed to have a web shop. Then all the parcel delivery just boomed out of the, like everyone needed to deliver something, not where people are coming to retrieve it, but just from as a package basically. So these kind of industries started to really boom, and there, of course, identity management plays a big role, right? If I do something, if I get something, I need to know whether I'm the person or not. In Veriff, for example, we haven't seen COVID at all, almost. You know, like all the numbers are going steadily up, so I don't know why is that, but we have seen a couple of industries transforming, and good example you all know probably is the notary services, yeah? So COVID happened, people didn't meet each other anymore, deals still happened, and all of a sudden, well, notary guys were actually ready for that. They just on time announced the sort of digital notary services and also used Veriff to identity verifications there. But what are the other industries that in COVID world might be affected? Like where the identity management becomes really a key thing.
It's not an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
If you allow, there are two different aspects of making sure that you know who one is and then what one has an access to. From the customer side, you want the services facing the internet. But from the corporate side, you actually don't want them facing the internet. And on the corporate side, I think we were less ready for this crisis that we are still facing than from the customer side. Some of the examples that you brought regarding the online shops, there was some supermarket chains that had the procedures ready to engage the customers, and some only had to rush to push them out there and then. So they realized that working as we have worked before is simply not feasible anymore. And I would like to highlight that the amount of work we do from outside the office will never ever go down to the level as it was on the 1st of January, still this year. So the huge peak that has come from this crisis has actually helped us to push towards this direction. And I think this is, you can't really consider this as a transformation. You should consider this as a disruption towards something, whether it's positive or not. I think it's positive, but the jury is still out there, to rethink how we work and where the value actually is created. So this is purely from looking both the customer side, but also the corporate side. And we should make a very clear distinction. Those two are very different things, at least in some sense.
Mm-hmm. But from the private sector, Kalev, you've seen, what is the ask from the market related to COVID?
Actually, related to COVID, I was hoping that Tõnu would say that, but I think that the industry that was the quickest to respond in general and had, I think, the most positive effect was a cybercrime, that those guys reacted like really quickly. the messages very quickly went from different CEO frauds to very quickly to the COVID messages. That was really a change in that industry, and that showed that how the agile work really can be very, very successful quickly. But
so all the scenarios where previously you inherited something in Africa changed into COVID funds?
Yes, all those scams like really, really quickly changed their motive of action for the person. So that was really fun to watch. I think that this still goes on, hasn't ended. But otherwise, I think that the online alcohol sales was like one of the things that I really saw that tried to look for a quick solution now in springtime when the persons could not come to home and they have real need to identify the person to the level where they understand that at least that person has 18 years on their shoulders or 21 or whatever is the limit in any of the countries. So that's kind of one of the things that happened, because previously that, well, if person wants to have a drink, then they have motivation and then they are willing to go somewhere. But when the shop really is closed, then it doesn't matter anymore. So that was one of the big things. And still casinos, I think, also reacted quite heavily to that, specifically in the spring that we saw. But no, I would say that otherwise, independent from the industry, it was clear that some of the companies started very quickly to solve their issues, and others tried to find the ways to get the benefits from the government to sustain somehow some kind of meaningful level of employment. And those had very different results, I would say, in the last half of the year. So it was really different. It wasn't industry specific, but it was a company culture and the way they approached the crisis, and those were very different.
Okay, Tanel, from academia side, did you or your colleagues or anyone you know studied the effect on industries like of COVID, basically?
I'm sure somebody has done that, and probably quite many people, but I don't personally know of this work. Typically, these things take time, so I guess that the interesting results are just starting to dribble out. But I haven't seen much yet.
Okay.
But I could say, though, that on the academia side, the practical teaching problems are actually pretty harsh. As you say, you could teach remotely. It is less efficient often, but the hard problem is actually monitoring the progress, like taking tests and checking exercises and all these kinds of stuff. And that's very hard to do remotely.
Go ahead.
Actually, when you mentioned the electronic notaries and a bit what Tanel was saying, in Estonia, and on the 1st of January, you could use 99.9% of the services digitally. There were 3 services which you had to do with physical presence. Properties, so notaries, getting married, or getting divorced. So today, there is one less of these services. You can also do the notaries online. This isn't because we don't know who's on the other side. The issue on Gov side is not the fact that we don't have the capabilities, but whether we really have a good understanding that the person who is there, we know who the person is, but whether the activity they are doing in good understanding of what this action really means. You know, getting married, or even more getting divorced, is not, at least in Estonia, not how it's done in Vegas. You sort of go out, you get drunk, and then you get married, and in the morning you get divorced. This is not how this government, to my understanding, wants to regulate this. But the physical presence was a sort of contributing factor to the fact that we have some sort of understanding that people actually want to carry this transaction out. And you know, with the help of technology, we've sort of established that these risks are mitigated, or at least we've able to explain it to the political side that by doing things a little bit different, the inherent risks will not actually increase, and that's the key.
I, as a technologist, I of course have a solution for your problem. To find out the intent of a person or whether they have understand it, they should just fill out the quiz when they get married. And if their quiz answers are conflicting, then that's a problem. Then we should...
They probably are ready. But just to comment on that, I think that was mentioned by Minister of Justice that you can divorce already online.
Sorry?
That you can divorce online, so you don't have to be physically present also for the divorce now. That there has been at least one case successfully ending
Guys,
like that.
this is a totally different topic and totally different conference.
Absolutely.
Yes, so let's keep with the IAM stuff. I just want to quantify the audience here a little bit. So I have 3 groups. I need you to mentally form into the group. The first group are those guys who are just in the beginning of their journey. You know, you have a couple of maybe SSO, OAuth, SAML, whatnot situations, Smart ID, Mobile ID integrations, etc. done, and you are just in the beginning of a journey. So that's the first group. The second group is that you actually have already in place, you already see it as a legacy, so you need to upgrade, you need to do something about it. Yeah? So that's the second group. And the third group is that you have everything done, you just need to do maintenance. So think of yourself, put yourself into one of those groups, and give me a show of hands who are in the first group. 1, 2 person, 3 people, okay? And in the second group, you have something legacy, you need to switch or upgrade. So that's about maybe about 10, 15 people maybe, okay? And the third group, everything is done. You just need to maintain stuff. Oh, good. There's lots of work to do. Awesome. So now, for panelists, you know those 3 groups. First ones are just starting, the others are doing legacy stuff, third group is not here. So what are your sort of one key advice when they start their journey for IAM solutions, upgrading, whatnot, implementing? One key advice, you sort of know that, okay, if you know this, you actually have a higher chance of succeeding in it.
You're looking at me.
I'm looking at
Okay.
A person in the panel.
Well, in my view, look at the infrastructure that you have, look at the architecture. Do your decisions, but start small. Don't aim to improve the world. Look your overall picture, but start small and build slowly on that.
Can you bring an example? Let's say I'm a startup, I have Google stuff online, everything works, you know, maybe 2-factor is also enforced to everyone. What's my next step?
The next step, depending on you probably also have, how do you call it, bookkeeping system. So every company, yes, you need to have email, website, but you also need bookkeeping. How do you bring something that you also have into that collective? That is something that most companies would need to have.
Right. Cool. Very good. Tanel, Kalev.
Looking at this show of hands, my feeling is that most people don't know in which group they are. and I also guess that almost nobody knows what needs to be done. That's always a very hard question, what should be done. And the very classic, well-tested approach in software architecture is first do nothing. If it's not absolutely necessary, do nothing. So if something needs to be done, it becomes very clear.
Very good.
How long should I be inactive? Like, with the first incident happens, or?
That's too hard question.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to feel it, yeah.
Got it.
So, and you want one thing only, then I would say that understand whether you only need access management or you also need identity management. So in the identity and access management world, understand what is your problem you are solving. And in many of the cases where I've come across those solutions and solving some issues somewhere, then those two are mixed together in the head, and actually no one cares about the identity, they only care about the access, like who is kind of behind that. Actually no one cares, and we might think that it is obvious in different ways that always the access means identity as well. It doesn't. And I think that the best example of that was last one 2 weeks ago, a bank, not from here, but their issue wasn't identity, because they said that if whatever we are offering, we are saying that we can like allow only one person to access one's accounts, and then that's clear that this is connected to the person, and we want to validate that, and we can do a lot of testing around that, and really, and you probably as well, as if you also want to allow access to that specific person somewhere. We provide such services, and this is kind of the identity management. And the bank said, but no, but I like that I can give this RSA token to my grandmother can give it to me. And basically I only need to manage the access. Like I need to manage the access. I don't mind who the person is. Actually, absolutely don't care. I only care about who takes the responsibility when something happens. And that has kind of legally stated somewhere, that the token moves around and identity is not important. So it's a different question than if you manage the accesses and if you manage the identities. Mm-hmm. Do you really care?
Right, okay. And you all are coming from government, academia, and then private sector. People come to you with their concerns about identity and access management. What are the sort of patterns of misunderstandings? You a little bit hinted to that already, but...
well, there are so many of those. We should have like a long lecture on
okay, that. So if we can establish some kind of a universal understanding, consensus about the failures that people are just jumping into immediately with certain, I don't know, maybe there is a misunderstanding of the identity access management in general.
The first thing is authorization and authentications are like totally different things.
Yeah.
Like this is a huge issue.
Yes.
People don't understand that. Also the fact that some attributes are not part of the identity, but rather like really volatile things in the world. I would say that from the previous 12 months, like those are still two things I would point out, that they're like authentications, authorizations are different things, and then that the attributes are not part of the identity. Even your name is not part of your identity. It's really volatile.
Anything from the government or academia side?
From our side, I would say that a lot of people still quite don't understand what it's about. And even though we've been trying to puzzle this and get it right from the early 90s or when internet started booming, we are still failing on the very basics of access management. And like Kalev said, sometimes we don't even care about identity. But given the fact that we are still terribly crappy, maybe it's not a very bad idea to look for more specialist help in this field. I.e., if you're doing something well, let's not invent the wheel. Let's sort of put the IT together like pieces of puzzle. We can do this in general construction. We can more or less do it on hardware, but this is, I think, where we need to look more on the software level.
Yeah, I like this suggestion that get expert help if stuff gets complicated, because it really is more complicated than people think. You could very easily have some fixed ideas how things should be done, and these could be very easily or most likely be mistaken. And then a good example in this context, I think, is internet voting. We all know these controversies, and there are many dimensions, like identity is a dimension, then certainty that your vote has been counted as a dimension, and then non-coercion, like free will is a dimension, and maybe there are more. And these all contradict each other, inevitably. So you have to find some points in the spectrum which suit you. So it's not like a binary question at all. And I think it's almost everywhere like that, that it's a fluid spectrum of many dimensions which you have to optimize. And if you think that there is right point, you know it, then you are probably mistaken.
Yeah, I wanted to come one thing that really, I think, has evolved over time, and 5 years ago it was a little bit of an issue, and now I think it's a big issue, is this understanding or misunderstanding about biometry and identity connected to that, and how the phones actually work. So the claim, I would say that the most heard claim about identity is that, but my phone knows who I am. It doesn't. Your phone does not know and doesn't care who you are. The only thing they know that the phone actually understands is that is the face that you are showing today similar to the one that was showed at the time of inception, basically. And that's what it does. It kind of does a really, really basic facial recognition or fingerprint recognition without ever caring to whom that face belongs to. It has never been asked, and no one kind of connects those dots. There is no kind of Apple user's face collection somewhere that is somehow magically analyzed every time you log in, and you are kind of maybe mistreated to your twin brother somewhere somehow. No, it's kind of doesn't happen like that. And this has created quite a big fuss in the industry, in the people's head, in the consumer world, definitely. Like, but the phone knows. Like, the phone recognizes me immediately. Like, why can't you? Because the phone doesn't recognize you. That's why we can't. And that's the huge misconception, I think, and that's also probably Tanel can discuss more about this, like how those algorithms actually have evolved, and how they learn more and more about the ways how we kind of look and how our fingerprints look, and then as I said, the criminal world is always acting quicker than anybody else. Also, the countermeasures have evolved, and how to kind of, now we are not talking about anymore whether we recognize that person, but whether we recognize that person, whilst being quite similar to the original person, has been now manipulated with whatever kind of technology, or that this kind of I think that the fingerprint stuff, now there is also a separate manipulation mechanism, physical manipulation mechanism for fingerprints, so that you don't have the same fingerprints anymore. So you physically harm yourself in a criminal world to get rid of those connections in the criminal databases. So, and we now have the algorithms to find those out, but those are only starting to evolve and only starting to understand whether that's a fake photo or that's an original photo, whether you have morphed some faces together or whether this is really one physical person. But this is like a thing that is going on, and I think it's Tanel's world where this now kind of is handed over already. That
Right.
we
don't,
as a humans, we don't make difference, but Tanel still can do.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
All right. We a little bit explored the industries that are transforming because of the COVID-19, but let's dive into a little bit of use cases of digital identity as such. So if you can, if you have some good ideas about the new use cases where people creating something and people consuming something need digital identity. I'm starting with one, you can continue. Like the overall basic signage of, or not signage, but the content signature. I'm creating a content, I'm giving it my name, basically. Everyone can validate that. This is something that is becoming more and more necessary because more content can be trusted. More and more content can be trusted. So when I'm creating something, I possibly need to be able to sign it, and that signature has to be there and never leave the piece that I've just created. But what are some of the other use cases where digital identity can really matter?
Well, I think the COVID essentially is a healthcare crisis, and of course the healthcare sector has always needed that, and the more you want to move the healthcare into the digital channels, the more you need a strong identity there. So this is an industry that probably cannot only be on the access management level, so they need this kind of identity there as well. So this clearly is a big thing, and we haven't kind of reached the leap somewhere like very high. We're still trying to jump off the ground.
I would perhaps take quite a few steps back, and Tanel is probably well more qualified to explain what identity is and what is a digital identity, because I think this is a key question that we sometimes confuse, and Kalev already mentioned that for example, fingerprint or face. Well, what does it tell you about me? When I came here, I was just listening to some of the podcasts, and as I often do, and they were talking about how before the 2016 elections, different voter groups were pushed not to actually go and vote. And the data that they had for these campaigns didn't touch fingerprints, didn't touch facial images. It touched age, gender, where they live, what's their income, a lot more about social aspects. But we focus too much on certain key areas, so maybe we sort of get it wrong.
But the point there is that you are focusing on not on the identity, but rather on the attribute set. And that's what I'm saying, that a lot of business use cases are more interested in attributes and the sets of attributes, rather than the identity, who is the person behind that. It's important that you match the necessary attribute set.
All right. In identity and the access management world, you have to trust somebody, right? There is an inception point. I mean, just very simply, government gives you identity when you are born.
Identity. That's a theme. That's a self-sovereign identity is a theme that is ongoing, I think, again, like 5 years at least now. And there you don't kind of have a trust in anybody. It's just kind of, you evolve in that world naturally somehow, somewhere.
Okay.
Nobody knows
But anyway,
where you came from and where you are going later.
I'm trusting Estonian government to maintain my digital identity.
This is very Estonian, yeah.
Yes.
In the UK, no one trusts
and
government.
somebody trusts Facebook, OAuth or something, somebody does. Is it realistic to expect that we can create a piece of technology, whatever blockchain related, etc., where I don't have to trust anybody than myself? What goes to my identity? I actually own my identity, and nobody can take it away from me.
You don't have an identity, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree
So
with that. I agree with
meaningless,
that. This is an illusion. You are an illusion.
We have agreed who you are. But
Yeah,
if you one
yeah.
day disagree and have a new agreement about you, then unfortunately,
I also need to trust not only that you trust I am this person, but I need to also trust what you're saying, and this is where we need some sort of common baseline.
Okay.
Sorry to say that.
So it's government.
no.
No, but listen, let me bring a simple example, I think, on these lines you brought up. Let's just have an ordinary remote meeting, like on Zoom or Skype or whatever. And this is often like security critical, maybe, like we don't want other people to listen to that. So the first thing is that you look at the other people and you recognize them. I know this is Tiit, looks like him, talks like him, must be Tiit. So
Unless it's a deep fake.
Yeah, but nobody signs anything like, or nobody uses passwords. That's pointless, yeah? You just look at their faces, how they talk, you recognize them. If there's somebody you don't recognize, then you ask other people, who is this guy? They tell you. So that's the way it normally works. That's the way how it works here, without any Zoom or Skype, right? And this is the most common identity. Now I could ask, is this a digital identity? If we do this over electronic conference, is this a digital identity? We don't know really, yeah? Because it's really digital.
For some use cases, it's enough.
And it could be faked.
Yes.
Even perhaps here, it is very hard to fake for us, but if it were like electronically, it would be a bit more realistic, yeah?
Yeah.
But still, coming back to the governments and governments' capabilities, governments are trustworthy to some level and on some aspects. I think the aspects that we spoke about on the election times and the social profiling of somebody, I think that most of the governments have like less than half of the capability of the social platforms to actually socially manipulate the person based on their information. Like still the Facebook is times better in that. Like matching you to some attribute sets that are interesting to manipulate your behavior, or at least to at all understand your behavioral preferences. Governments normally don't have that kind of data about us, we hope.
You are correct. People give out a lot more to Facebook, not only about who they are, i.e. name, date of birth, etc., but also how they think. Yeah, this article was crap. Maybe I comment, I give my thoughts, so you can already see how I argue, how I think, etc., etc. But you were aiming for not the fact that if I ensure confidentiality, then I can sort of ensure integrity. But you were aiming for the integrity part, right? With the question of
because not all governments are really like okay.
Yeah.
But as I said, you were aiming for the integrity, and I think this is becoming increasingly more important to really understand the data that is pushed out, whether that actually goes with that identity or not.
And still we are manipulating the identities we have. The physical persons in the physical world, those who have, I don't know, dual citizenships, or those who have even like 2 passports from Estonia to travel to Middle East and to US with different passports. Like they actually manipulate their physical identity and perception of them in the border gate somewhere, that this border should not understand that I have actually recently been in the Middle East. There's some kind of manipulation in the physical world with my identity. And of course, when we now hear about this like social networks and understanding about us, how much of our preferences are known to Alexa, for example, then there are people who say that, well, for a time when I don't want them to hear what I'm telling, I switch them off. And this is a manipulation of my digital identity. And because about me, there is a kind of a set of attributes somewhere, my preferences, my talk, and I leave something out. So I manipulate my identity in different places, and it has always been so, and it will always be so. I don't think that there will be ever somebody who figures us out, because we don't know who we are, and therefore how can others?
Let's talk a little. Sorry.
I wanted to say, now imagine someone deep fakes your Alexa to let it think that it's you, but actually tries to slowly poison the knowledge that Alexa knows about you. Then I think that's where what you were talking about, the integrity, becomes important, because there are ways to also abuse that.
Yeah.
And this is like the dystopia or utopia that we have, that one day a governmental agency can kind of simply delete us, like this is, like we don't exist anymore. We are not.
But before that, Let's talk about more features in IAM world. So in remote work, in COVID, I'm logging into various services with something. My digital footprint has changed. Even if previously I logged in from the office, so everything was, there is physical security, whatnot, etc. So now the digital footprint has changed. Maybe you already have some kind of good use cases or examples where this kind of attributes, as you mentioned, that are glued to my identity all the time, actually are already, at work. That there are some risk-based scenarios. For example, let's take internet bank, right? If I use the same computer, it has the cookie, boom, it doesn't ask my ID code when I'm logging in from the same computer because it just already knows it, right? So what are some of the risk scenarios or risk-based authentication scenarios? Some examples on those that you have seen already in use.
I've seen a huge amount of requests, and in many of those cases, we are still disputing whether it's allowed. And currently, I would say we at least feel that this has brought up a lot of questions of could we do those and those checks, and we are not always sure that legally that's okay. So yeah, it is a demand on the market, and we, for example, we have to follow our own terms and conditions with the end user. And we have said that we never ever profile you, for example, and that means that we cannot also
not even the browser data, nothing like
no, we don't profile you as a person. We don't do this kind of a verification like from login to login or signing to signing. That is not allowed, and therefore a lot of these kind of requests have to kind of be pushed back and say that not going to happen. But the request amount has raised, yes. And to have more checks on like where somebody was, what they did, this is a theme definitely. And the wish is to monitor and see where you are going actually. If you are a law-abiding citizen, maybe you should be afraid of that.
But do you agree that when I'm somewhere else, you should actually know this when you are transforming my digital identity into this transaction, that I've changed location miraculously from one continent to another within an hour? I mean,
yeah, and this is again based on what do we assume that, and as you know, we have done that as technicians for years and years to fool the US to give us content from US.
Yeah.
So in this context, like you are traveling in seconds from Estonia to US, and no one has ever like doubted you to be a miraculous person. So, so I think, well, maybe someone has. Sorry, in your case, but basically the technology that we're currently using is not very strongly stating where you are. So you might have hints in these trails about a person doing something that is weird, but it's very hard to get assurance on that. And therefore those kind of, those clues exist and those clues are followed, and then you raise there maybe the potential risk and therefore do some additional actions.
But do you all agree that this risk-based authentication, authentication risk score will play a role in future?
Yeah, and this is the kind of, we have had for years and years this kind of mention of level of assurance. So how assured are you about something? And I think that this didn't make sense for years and years in many discussions, but I think that now it makes sense in every transaction already. How assured am I? Because I'm never ever coming to be like 100% assured. And then what is the comfortable level? Because every additional percentage costs me some additional euros. So do I want to have everywhere the maximum? Or am I okay with a risk-based approach where I'm saying that, well, 10% to transfer, I don't know, half of my real estate somewhere is okay?
All right. We are getting to the close. Somebody can sign me if we really need to close, but otherwise I can just continue. I have a couple of more interesting questions. But one question that I always puzzle my candidates with is that do you want to answer a question that I haven't asked yet?
Because you spoiled me in a sense.
You
gave me a sort of a teaser that one should be ready for this.
For what?
For
this question?
For this weird question that no one ever thinks of. I would say that why do you have perception that identity only concerns people? Because we only talk about identity and access management in the context of people.
Can you answer that question?
We should think also machines. They are, to the extent and ever more, sort of, extending our arms. Yeah, they're still, tied with someone, but sometimes this someone is more difficult to identify. But you can only identify things with the organization. So I think we should focus also on machine-to-machine identity and access management. Not only thinking of human beings.
But we give them certificates to talk to and public key infrastructure for that. So
and this is fine.
Yeah.
You were challenging whether we should have this sort of tear-down approach or something of what looks like a distributed ledger. Well, we're still having globally on this. We have certain root certificate issuers that sort of look at each other as a community. Yeah, I think you're doing a good job. I trust you, and you sort of trust me. So everyone else should both trust us because we say nice things about each other. But in excluding the certificates, access management, if you grant an access to a machine, you normally do it through API, you have some keys, etc., etc. You know who has an access. The certificate only points that I have an access to the right side on the receiving end, but who's on the requesting end?
Right.
We should think on this.
Yes. Tanel, you want to answer a question that I haven't asked?
I perceive this as an open mic, and I have a complaint to make. So I'm putting on my software architect hat and thinking about all this identity stuff. Whenever we need to get some stronger kind of identity, like Estonian ID of some kind, or even Facebook or Google authentication or whatever, it's always very complicated. It's too complicated. It hasn't gotten much easier over like tens of years. It's a huge pain. People don't want to do that because they know it's really hard. And people saying like, oh, we have these APIs, very easy to use. That's not true. That's just bullshit. So it's still very hard. And I think in this post-COVID situation where we have a stronger need for these kinds of things in everyday situations, we should make these things easier and not just say they are easier. That's my complaint.
Good. I do like this approach that make the complicated things easier. They become less complicated. But it has always a downside that actually they don't meet the requirements anymore after that, and you have fooled yourself into a different world, which is fine if you kind of are okay with that belief. But to answer the Tiit's question, do I want to answer the question that you didn't ask? Always I would like to answer those questions.
All right. Got it. Right, let's wrap up. Any last recommendations to the folks in audience in terms of the identity and access management journey?
Yeah, don't hate passwords. Especially in the, but understand the context, of course. But this is not the kind of a fight you will ever win. Still, I don't have a clue how how else would you kind of take a naked computer and have some kind of an access mechanism in there if you don't kind of introduce the password there? And we have to say that the most precious information technology and those servers that we have somewhere in the server rooms, they tend to still have those passwords, and you should have the password policies. And maybe the biggest thing there is that please read the NIST requirements, which already for years state that you don't need to change them very often. Like, have a good password and don't force people to change that, because that's still a theme that goes around. It's not a good practice. Has never been a good practice.
Tanel, a couple of words to our audience.
Well, I already made my complaint, and I don't want to make any more.
All right. But Tenu.
Get the basics right. Passwords will probably not disappear, but keeping them in plain text or without salting them in a proper fashion will not deliver what you actually want. It's food for the bad guys.
All right. But with that, we're going to wrap up. Do we take some questions as well, or how do we... do you guys have any questions to the panelists? Oh, there you go. There's a question back there.
Hi. This is a question maybe for the government and the guys at SK. We have this really nice bubble here in Estonia. We have this nice ID card. We have electronic identity, really easy to use. People know how to use it. But what we're seeing here in terms of offering banking services is it's really hard to scale outside of Estonia, because the ways we have is quite unique, and to combine it with any workflows outside is almost impossible to find the right set of service providers to be compliant. So how to be more universal so we could scale outside?
Well, we already have an attempt on EU level with EIDAS to try and make things a little bit more universal. Let's be honest, it doesn't quite work as we would expect. So there's a lot of work to do, and a lot of this is to do with the fact, which was already mentioned, whether people actually trust the governments and trust the governments to do a little bit right. Because as was also said, the data that governments have compared to Facebook or Google, peanuts. Completely peanuts. Doesn't tell anything about you other than those few key attributes are you, and we sort of know, okay, we've issued this digital identity to you. So when you're on the other side of the screen, we know it's you or someone you've actually given your ID card or mobile ID together with PIN codes. But then the judge is out on you.
Just to comment on that, I think that this is to some extent very, very kind of fundamental question, and the fundamental in the sense that you brought also not only the identity there, but also the compliance side there. And the main question about the compliance is that what those compliance rules are trying to achieve. And although we tend to think that every government wants to extend the economy outside of their borders and have an open economy with everybody, and then we have to still we'll look at the fact that most of the governments in most of the countries want to protect their local economy against anything that comes from outside. Therefore, the compliance has been built for anybody who would like to have an international business not to enter there. It is still, I think, in most of the countries the thing. On the identity side, I would say that yeah, the EIDAS is absolutely good thing we have in Europe. I don't see that scaling to the world in 10 years or so. So that means that anything you want to do outside of EU is still not accessible. But I have a great hope that this will be rather solved again by private sector. That the kinds of services like breakfast providing or like similar services outside, we as well are supporting different countries. That is something that I think that the business need and the private sector will rather solve in 10 years than the public sector and some kind of international regulations. But still, sector-based compliance issues will remain.
I have a very controversial hope. I almost am afraid to say so, but I'd like people to use more Facebook and Google and big company authentication and them to proceed towards this worldwide Facebook or Google or Microsoft, whatever identity you have. I think that's our best bet worldwide.
It's the same, basically.
Yeah, that's the same what you said.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thank you for the... Oh,
One
more
question.
Yes, go ahead.
I have maybe a bit of off-topic question, or I'd like to test whether it's off-topic. It started by you discussing identity and attributes, and all identity and access management is about owner of the identity and somebody deciding whether he has an access to something. But then there is a totally kind of another trend coming up. It's about personal data. It's about controlling who has access to that data. So how do you see those two worlds colliding, merging together, or is it like two separate things and will remain separate?
No, they are very connected. A little bit touched on that previously as well when we talked about this COVID influence, and that the identity and access management and the risks kind of are pointing to invade the privacy of the customer to the level as that previously was not okay. And we are still trying to not go that direction as much as we can. But this is a very connected theme there. And from the other side, this the whole identity and access topic from the point of view of personal data is interesting, because I've had that discussion with Germans, which is interesting. Because Germans don't kind of want to know the person throughout their life cycle, who they are. But they were the prime motivators behind the GDPR that we have. And the controversy there is that they have stated in the European regulation now that I should be able to go and ask from different companies what do you know about me. Germans have the right also to go and ask about them from somewhere, but at the same time, German law states that no one should know who they are. And this is kind of a controversy in this privacy regulation, or like if you treat the privacy thing as a GDPR thing. But identity and access management are very much about the privacy and the footprint that you are leaving everywhere, and then do you have a control over that, and how much do you have the control, and can you really delete your data, can you request a deletion? A thing in this, again, in these logs that you saw here previously in this nice slide. I hope that later Forstrop will do their kind of sales pitch on that. But these logs are like key thing there, because on every record you will have the timeline. How long can you maintain that log? When does that log entry has to go away from there? And every person has a right to monitor whether you have followed through this promise. And this is heavy burden if the whole group here would like to even like bombard Estonian companies on that. Like we would all die under that probably. This is heavy, and how to do that is hard. And that's why a lot of companies have actually drifted away from strong identity claims, saying that I'm only worried about this access part, because I don't want to have a personal data. Until I don't have personal data, although even the IP address is treated as a personal data, but as far as I don't have the personal data, I'm kind of much better off. This is what has changed, and what is not probably the case in every industry, but somewhere it is. So I don't know if I answered your question. But others can help me. You probably have to repeat the question.
All right. Madis, you okay? To finish up? Okay, let's finish up. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for our audience. And I guess that's it for the event. And I was asked to suggest you to take more coffee and talk to each other from 2 meters distance. Yes. Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.